Lyra's hands didn't shake as she poured the wine. They couldn't. Not when Beta Matthias was watching from the shadows of the servants' corridor, his eyes cold and calculating. Not when the vial of wolfsbane, concentrate enough to kill an alpha king, sat empty in her apron pocket. She'd learned not to show fear years ago. Fear drew attention. Attention brought pain. The golden liquid flowed smooth and dark into the crystal goblet, innocent as sunlight, deadly as nightshade. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Across the private dining hall, Alpha King Kale sat alone at the massive oak table, reviewing territory maps by candlelight. He did this every night, worked late, ate alone, trusted no one to serve him except the silent kitchen Omega, who'd never spoken a word in the 5 years she'd been in his household. That was why they'd chosen heir. Lira had been 12 when rogues attacked her family's traveling caravan. She'd watched her parents die, watched her older brother try to fight with a courage that wasn't enough. She'd opened her mouth to scream for help, and nothing had come out. Not then, not ever since. The trauma had stolen her voice, and the moon goddess had never given it back. The Beta had found her 3 days later, half dead from exposure and grief. He'd brought her to the capital, to the palace kitchens, and she'd worked there ever since. Silent, invisible, useful. She'd never minded being invisible. Invisible meant safe. Until tonight, when Beta Matthias had cornered her in the cold storage room and given her a choice that wasn't a choice at all. "The Alpha King is a tyrant," he'd said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. "He's led us into wars we didn't need, made alliances that benefit only him, weakened the pack with his paranoia and isolation. The council has decided it's time for new leadership." Lira had stared at him, her throat tight with the words she couldn't speak. Kale wasn't a tyrant. She'd served him for 5 years, watched him work himself to exhaustion for his people, seen him make hard choices that cost him sleep and peace. He was distant, yes. Cold, perhaps, but not cruel. Never cruel. "You'll serve him his evening wine," Matthias had continued, pressing the vial into her hand. "You'll pour this into his cup, and you'll say nothing, not that you could, of course." He'd smiled then, and it had been worse than any snarl. "If you refuse, I'll make sure every servant in this palace knows what you really are. An Omega. You've been hiding it well with those herbs your grandmother taught you, but I know. I've always known. Imagine what would happen if the Alpha King discovered you've been deceiving him for 5 years. Imagine what the other alphas in court would do with a hidden Omega once you're cast out." The threat had been clear. Poison the king, or be exposed and destroyed. Lira had taken the vial with trembling fingers. Now, standing in the dining hall with the poisoned wine in her hands, she watched Alpha King Kale make a notation on his map. He looked exhausted. His dark hair, nearly black, shot through with silver at the temples, though he was only 30, fell forward over his face. His amber eyes, usually sharp and assessing, were dulled with fatigue. They said he never slept well, that nightmares plagued him, that he'd lost his entire family to a coordinated attack when he was 20, and the guilt of being the only survivor had turned him hard and untrusting. They said he was cursed, that the moon goddess herself had marked him for loneliness because he'd failed to protect those he loved. Lira didn't know if the curse was real, but she knew loneliness when she saw it. She recognized it in the way Kale ate his meals alone, worked late into the night alone, walked the palace corridors alone. He trusted no one, let no one close. She understood that, too. "Lira." His voice cut through her thoughts deep, rough with exhaustion. He didn't look up from his maps. "Is the wine ready?" She nodded, though he wasn't looking. Then she did what she'd done every night for 5 years. She approached silently, set the goblet on the table beside his right hand, and stepped back to wait, in case he needed anything else. Usually, he waved her away after a moment, dismissed her without a word, too absorbed in his work to care about a mute Omega servant. Tonight, he reached for the goblet. Lyra's heart stopped. She could see Matthias in the shadows of the corridor, watching, waiting. His hand rested on the dagger at his belt, a promise and a threat. "Do this, or I'll do worse to you." Kale lifted the goblet to his lips, and Lira moved without thinking. She lunged forward, her hand shooting out to grab his wrist. The goblet tilted, wine sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Kale's head snapped up, amber eyes widening in shock. In 5 years, she'd never touched him. Never dared. Servants didn't touch the Alpha King. But she held his wrist now, her fingers small and pale against his tanned skin. And she could feel his pulse beneath her touch. Strong, steady, alive. She had seconds, maybe less. Matthias would move soon, would realize she was betraying him. Lira released Kale's wrist, grabbed the goblet from his hand, and before he could react, before Matthias could stop her, she raised it to her own lips and drank. The wine burned going down. Or maybe that was the wolfsbane. She couldn't tell. She drank half the goblet in 3 large swallows, then set it down on the table with shaking hands. Kale surged to his feet, his chair crashing backward. "What are you?" The poison hit her system like liquid fire. Lyra's knees buckled. She tried to stay upright, tried to show him to make him understand, but the wolfsbane was concentrated, deadly, meant to kill an Alpha King. In her smaller body, in her omega, blood, it worked even faster. She collapsed. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Kale's face, shock giving way to fury, and something else, something that looked almost like fear. And Matthias, stepping from the shadows with his dagger drawn, realizing his plan had just gone catastrophically wrong. Kale caught Lira before she hit the floor. Her body was small in his arms, too light, too fragile. Her skin had already gone gray, her lips tinged blue. Foam flecked the corners of her mouth. Poison. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She'd drunk poison, deliberately. The wine meant for him. Sage. His roar shook the palace. Stone. Winter. To me now. He barely registered Matthias moving in the shadows. Barely saw the dagger. But his gamma, Stone, materialized from the corridor entrance like an avenging spirit, massive and granite hard. The Beta's dagger clattered to the floor as Stone slammed him against the wall. "Don't kill him yet," Kale snarled, gathering Lira closer. Her breathing was shallow, erratic. "I want to know who else is involved." Sage, the ancient pack healer, rushed in with Winter close behind. The Beta female took one look at Lyra's gray skin and swore viciously. "Wolfsbane," Sage said, already pulling vials from her healer's bag. Concentrated. How much did she drink? Half a goblet. Maybe more. Kale's voice came out rougher than he intended. "It was meant for me." She drank it instead. Sage's silver eyebrows rose, but she asked no questions. She was already working, forcing an antidote between Lyra's blue lips, checking her pulse, her breathing, her fading life signs. "She's dying," Sage said bluntly. "This much wolfsbane in an Omega's system, she has minutes, Kale. Maybe less. Then save her." It came out as an alpha command, absolute and unyielding. "I don't care what it takes. Save her." Winter knelt beside them, her ice blue eyes sharp with understanding. "Kale. She's the kitchen Omega. The mute one. Why would she? She was trying to warn me." Kale looked down at Lyra's face, so pale, so still. In 5 years, he'd barely looked at her. She'd been part of the household machinery, silent, efficient, invisible. He'd never noticed the delicate bone structure of her face, the silver blonde hair she kept braided tightly back, the calluses on her hands from years of kitchen work. He'd never noticed her at all. And she'd just sacrificed herself to save his life. Matthias was in the shadows, Stone reported, dragging the Beta forward. The man was conscious but barely, bleeding from his nose where Stone had slammed him into stone. He had a dagger drawn. He was watching her. They forced her to do it, Kale realized, fury igniting in his chest. They used her, threatened her somehow, made her poison the wine, and she drank it herself rather than let me die. Sage worked frantically, pouring antidote after antidote into Lyra's mouth, pressing her hands to the girl's chest to force her heart to keep beating. But the wolfsbane was too strong, too concentrated. It was winning. "She's not responding," Sage said. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." And for the first time in the decades Kale had known her, the healer sounded frightened. "The poison is too advanced. I can't. There's one way." Winter's voice cut through the panic. "It's dangerous. It might not work, but it's the only chance she has." Kale looked up sharply. "Tell me." An alpha's blood. Your blood specifically. Winter's expression was grave. You're the strongest alpha in generations, Kale. Your blood has healing properties. You know this. If you give her a direct transfusion, your alpha healing might counteract the wolfsbane long enough for Sage's antidotes to work. It's never been done with wolfsbane this concentrated, Sage warned. And the process, Kale, if she's your mate. She's not my mate. Kale said it automatically, but something in his chest twisted, uncomfortably. I would have felt the bond. Would you? Winter's gaze was too knowing. You've spent 10 years shutting everyone out, building walls so thick nothing could reach you. What if the mate bond has been there all along, and you've been too locked down to feel it? Kale looked down at Lira's dying face, felt the strange, desperate pull in his chest that had appeared the moment she'd collapsed. The overwhelming need to protect her, to save her, to keep her alive at any cost. Maybe it was just his wolf's instinct to preserve pack members. Maybe it was something more. Do it, he ordered. Whatever it takes. Sage moved quickly, producing a silver blade. She cut Kale's wrist first, then Lira's deeper, to open a vein. The moment their blood touched, mixing together as Sage bound their wrists, the world exploded. The mate bond slammed into Kale with the force of an avalanche. 5 years. She'd been here for 5 years, silent and invisible. And she'd been his mate the entire time. The bond had been there, dormant, waiting, blocked by his walls, by his curse of loneliness, by his absolute certainty that he deserved no one after failing to protect his family. But it was there now, blazing to life with an intensity that stole his breath. He could feel her pain, her fear, her desperate fading hope. Feel the poison burning through her veins, feel her life slipping away. And beneath it all, he felt something else. Her emotions from the past 5 years. Her loneliness matching his own. Her quiet observation of him, noting his exhaustion, his isolation, his pain. Her desire to help somehow, even though she had no voice. Her acceptance that he'd never see her as anything more than a silent servant. Her resignation tonight when they'd threatened her. Her choice to die rather than let him be murdered. The bond showed him everything, and it broke something open in Kale's chest that had been frozen for a decade. Hold on, he whispered, gripping her, bound wrist tighter. His alpha blood flowed into her, fighting the poison. Hold on, Lira. Please. I finally found you. Don't leave me now. Her eyelids fluttered. Just barely. But it was enough. It's working, Sage breathed. The alpha blood is neutralizing the wolfsbane. Keep going, Kale. Don't stop. Kale didn't intend to. He poured everything into the bond, his strength, his healing, his desperate need for her to survive. The curse of loneliness that had plagued him for 10 years suddenly made terrible sense. The moon goddess hadn't cursed him with isolation as punishment. She'd been preparing him to recognize his mate when he finally found her. A mate who understood silence, who understood loneliness, who understood being invisible. A mate who'd been right beside him for 5 years, and he'd been too closed off to notice. The gray color was slowly leaving Lira's skin. Her breathing, though still shallow, was becoming more regular. The blue tinge faded from her lips. She was going to survive. Kale felt something crack inside him, the last of the walls he'd built, crumbling completely. And through the mate bond, he sent her everything he couldn't say aloud. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see you. I'm sorry I let them use you. I'm sorry you had to save me. I'm sorry I was too broken to feel our bond until now. But I feel it now. And I'm never letting you go. Lira's eyes opened just a crack, just enough to meet his gaze. They were green, he realized. Pale green like new leaves in spring. Beautiful. Her lips moved, trying to form words she couldn't speak. But through the bond, newly awakened and blazing bright, Kale heard her anyway. I'm sorry I couldn't warn you sooner. I'm sorry I'm just an omega. I'm sorry I'm not enough. You're everything. Kale interrupted, his voice rough with emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a decade. You're my mate. You saved my life. You're the bravest person I've ever known. And you're going to be my Luna. Shock flooded through the bond from her end. Disbelief, fear, hope. After you recover, Kale added, gentling his tone, we have things to discuss. starting with who threatened you, who forced you to do this, and why you've been hiding the fact that you're an Omega for 5 years. Her eyes wide in genuine fear now. I'm not angry, Kale assured her quickly. I understand why you hid. This palace isn't safe for unmated Omegas, but that's going to change. Everything is going to change. He looked up at Stone, who still held Matthias pinned. The Beta was conscious now, watching the scene with growing horror as he realized what he'd done. He'd tried to force the Alpha King's mate to poison him. He'd threatened her, used her. Take him to the dungeons, Kale ordered, his voice cold as winter. Find out who else is part of this conspiracy. Every name, every plan, everything. And Stone, make it thorough. Stone's smile was not kind. Yes, Alpha. As the Gamma dragged Matthias away, the Beta's desperate protest echoing down the corridor, Sage carefully unwound the binding on Kale and Lira's wrists. Both cuts sealed immediately, Kale's alpha healing already at work. She needs rest, Sage said. Days of it. The wolfsbane is neutralized, but her body has been through trauma, and the mate bond awakening so suddenly, especially during near death, she'll be overwhelmed when she fully wakes. She'll stay in my quarters, Kale said. Not a question. Winter raised an eyebrow. Kale, that's highly improper before the mating ceremony. I don't care. Kale gathered Lira into his arms, cradling her carefully. She weighed almost nothing. How had he never noticed how small she was? How fragile. Someone just tried to use my mate to kill me. She's staying where I can protect her, where I can watch over her. Anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me directly. No one argued. No one was foolish enough to challenge an Alpha King who'd just found his mate and nearly lost her in the same night. Kale carried Lira through the palace corridors, ignoring the shocked stares of servants and guards. Winter hurried ahead to prepare his chambers. Sage followed close behind with her healing supplies. In his private rooms, Kale laid Lira on his bed, the massive 4-poster he'd slept in alone for 10 years. She looked impossibly small in the center of it, her silver blonde hair finally loosened from its braid and spreading across his pillows. She was breathing easier now. Color had returned to her cheeks, but she was still unconscious, her body needing time to recover from the poison and the forced awakening of the mate bond. Kale sat on the edge of the bed, unable to look away from her. I should have noticed, he said quietly. 5 years. She was here for 5 years. You were cursed, Winter said gently, moving around the room to light candles, locked in grief and loneliness. The moon goddess knew what she was doing, Kale. She gave you a mate who understands silence, who won't push you to speak before you're ready, who knows what it's like to be invisible. She shouldn't have to be invisible anymore. Kale reached out carefully, tucking a strand of silver blonde hair behind Lyra's ear. The touch sent warmth through the mate bond. She saved my life tonight. She drank poison rather than let me die. How do I even begin to repay that? You love her, Sage said simply. You protect her. You give her a voice, not literally, but in every way that matters. You make sure she knows she matters, that she's seen. Kale nodded slowly. I can do that. He could. He would. Starting tonight and lasting forever. Because Lira, his silent, invisible, impossibly brave mate, had done something no one else had managed in 10 years. She'd broken through his walls, shattered his curse of loneliness, reminded him that some things were worth fighting for, worth living for, worth dying for, if necessary. She'd been willing to die for him. Now, he'd spend the rest of his life making sure she knew she was worth living for. Lira woke to warmth. Not the thin, scratchy blanket of her servants' quarters, not the cold stone floor she sometimes fell asleep on after working late. This was different soft furs, the scent of pine and winter rain, and something else. Something that made her wolf stir in recognition even before her eyes opened. Mate. The memories crashed into her all at once. The poison, Matthias's threats, drinking the wine meant for the Alpha King, the burning agony as wolfsbane flooded her system. And then, the bond. She'd felt it ignite between them like lightning, fierce and undeniable. Had felt Kale's shock, his fury, his desperate determination to save her. Had felt 10 years of his loneliness matching her own. Lyra's eyes flew open. She was in a massive bed in a room she'd never seen before. Dawn light filtered through floor to ceiling windows that overlooked the northern mountains. The walls were dark wood, the furnishings sparse but expensive. Everything was immaculately clean but somehow still felt empty, unused. This was Kael's private chamber. She was in the Alpha King's bed. Panic seized her chest. She tried to sit up, but her body protested immediately. Everything ached. Her muscles felt like they'd been shredded and barely stitched back together. "Don't move too quickly." The voice came from her left, deep and familiar. "Sage said you'd be weak for a few days." Lira turned her head carefully. Kael sat in a chair beside the bed, his large frame somehow making the furniture look small. He'd changed from his formal dinner clothes into simple dark pants and a loose shirt. His black-silver hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. His amber eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept at all. "You've been unconscious for 18 hours, he continued, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. "Sage said that was normal. Your body needed time to heal from the wolfsbane and from the mate bond awakening so violently. The mate bond. It hummed between them now, a golden thread connecting her chest to his. She could feel him through it. His exhaustion, his relief that she was awake, his carefully controlled fury at whoever had threatened her, and beneath it all, something that felt almost like wonder. Lyra's throat worked uselessly. There was so much she wanted to say, needed to explain, but the words wouldn't come. They never did. "I know you can't speak," Kael said, and there was no judgment in his tone, only understanding. "Winter told me what she knew of your history, the rogue attack, the trauma. I'm sorry that happened to you." He stood, moving to a small table near the window. When he returned, he carried a leather journal and a piece of charcoal. He set them carefully on the bed beside her. "Sage said you might be too weak to write much yet, but if you can manage even a few words, I need to know who threatened you, who forced you to poison the wine." Lira stared at the journal. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, pulled it into her lap. The charcoal felt heavy in her fingers, but she managed to form shaky letters. "Beta Matthias. Said he'd expose me as Omega if I refused. Said Court Alphas would use me. Had no choice." Kael's jaw clenched as he read, a low growl building in his chest. "Matthias is currently in the dungeons being questioned by Stone. He's been very forthcoming about the conspiracy 12 council members, 4 minor alphas, all planning a coup. They thought removing me would create enough chaos for them to seize power." He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that Lira could feel the heat radiating from him. Close enough that the mate bond pulled taut between them, wanting connection, wanting touch. "They chose you because you were invisible," Kael continued, his voice rough with barely suppressed rage. "Because you couldn't speak, couldn't defend yourself, couldn't warn anyone, even if you wanted to. They thought you were the perfect weapon." Lira wrote quickly. "I'm sorry. Should have found another way to warn you. Shouldn't have been so weak." "Weak." Kael's voice sharpened. He reached out carefully, slowly giving her time to pull away, and tilted her chin up until she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "Lira, you drank poison meant to kill an Alpha King. You knew it would destroy you, and you did it anyway because it was the only way to warn me. That's not weakness. That's the bravest thing I've ever witnessed." The mate bond flooded with his sincerity, his genuine awe. He meant it. He actually meant it. Tears burned in Lyra's eyes. She blinked them back furiously, but one escaped, tracking down her cheek. Kael caught it with his thumb, his touch impossibly gentle for someone so powerful. "You saved my life," he said softly. "You saved my kingdom, and in doing so, you broke a curse I've carried for 10 years." Lyra's eyebrows rose in question. "The moon goddess cursed me after my family died," Kael explained, his hand still cradling her face. "Or I thought she had. I was the only survivor of the attack that killed my parents, my siblings, my uncle. 23 members of my family, dead because I wasn't strong enough, fast enough, smart enough to save them. After that, anyone who tried to get close to me, anyone I tried to care about, they died or betrayed me or left. I thought it was punishment, thought I was cursed to be alone." He paused, his thumb tracing a gentle path along her cheekbone. "But it wasn't a curse. It was preparation. The moon goddess was teaching me to recognize silence, to value it, to understand that the quietest voices are often the most important. She was preparing me for you. More tears fell. Lira couldn't stop them. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Like she mattered. Like her silence was a gift, instead of a flaw. Kale's other hand came up to cradle her face gently. You understand loneliness. You understand being invisible, being overlooked. You understand that sometimes silence speaks louder than words. And you... His voice cracked slightly. You saw me. For 5 years you served me, watched me, and you saw what no one else did, that I was lonely, that I was hurting, that I needed someone who understood. Through the mate bond, Lira felt the truth of his words, felt the decade of isolation that had nearly destroyed him, felt how her presence, even silent, even invisible, had been a comfort he hadn't recognized. She picked up the charcoal again, her hand steadier now. I watched you work yourself to exhaustion, wanted to help but didn't know how, wanted to tell you to rest, to eat properly, to let someone share the burden. But I had no voice. You have a voice now, Kale said firmly. Maybe not spoken words, but you have me. You have the mate bond. I can hear you through it, your emotions, your thoughts when they're strong enough, and we'll find other ways, sign language, writing, whatever you need. You will never be voiceless again, Lira. Not as my mate, not as my Luna. Luna, the word sent a spike of fear through the bond. Kale felt it immediately. What is it? What frightens you? Lira wrote frantically. I'm nobody, just a servant. An Omega with no family, no pack, no status. The court will never accept me as Luna. They'll see me as weak, as beneath you. I'll make you look weak. Stop. The alpha command in Kale's voice made her hand freeze. But then he gentled his tone. Lira, look at me. She did. Those amber eyes blazed with absolute certainty. You are my mate. The moon goddess herself chose you for me. Any wolf who questions that questions her wisdom. His hands moved from her face to take both of hers, careful of her still healing body. And you are not weak. An Omega who drinks poison to save her mate, who protects her alpha king at the cost of her own life. That's not weakness. That's strength most alphas will never possess. He squeezed her hands gently. The court will accept you because I command it, and any who don't will find themselves without a place in my territory. I've been alone for 10 years, Lira. I've been cold and distant and half alive. You brought me back. You saved me in more ways than just the poison. I'm not letting anyone take you from me. Not Matthias, not the court, not your own fears. You're mine now. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent warmth flooding through the mate bond. He meant every word. He would protect her, fight for her, keep her safe. For the first time in 17 years since the night she'd lost her voice and her family, Lira felt truly safe. She managed to write one more shaky sentence. I don't know how to be a Luna. Kale smiled then, and it transformed his face. She'd never seen him smile before. It made him look younger, less burdened. Beautiful in a fierce, untamed way. Then we'll learn together, he said, because I don't know how to be a mated alpha king. I don't know how to let someone in, how to share my burdens, how to be vulnerable. But I want to learn, with you. The door opened quietly, and Sage entered carrying a tray of food and medical supplies. Winter followed close behind, her ice blue eyes assessing Lira with approval. Good, you're awake, Sage said, setting the tray on a side table. How do you feel? Dizzy? Nauseous? Any lingering pain? Lira nodded carefully yes to all three. That's normal. The wolfsbane damaged your internal organs. They're healing, but slowly. Sage began examining her with professional efficiency. You'll need to stay in bed for at least 3 more days. Light meals only. And no stress. The mate bond awakening puts additional strain on the body. She'll have everything she needs, Kyle said firmly. I've already informed the kitchen staff, and I've assigned Winter as her personal guard. Winter inclined her head. I'll be stationed outside your door, Luna. No one gets in without the Alpha King's permission. Not Luna yet, Lira wrote quickly, showing it to Winter. The beta female smiled fierce and approving. Oh, you will be. Kale's already planning the mating ceremony. 3 weeks from now, under the full moon. The entire territory will witness it. Panic must have shown on Lira's face because Kale immediately moved closer, his presence grounding through the mate bond. "We'll do it however you're comfortable," he assured her. "If you want a small ceremony, we can arrange that. If you want to wait until you're stronger, we'll wait. This is your choice, Lira. I won't force anything on you." She appreciated that. But the truth was, the mate bond was already pulling at both of them, already demanding completion, already making her hyper-aware of every breath Kale took, every movement, every emotion bleeding through their connection. And there was a practical consideration too. Lira wrote, "If ceremony is public and official, harder for conspirators to target me, harder to claim I'm unworthy, better to establish position quickly." Kale read it, and something like pride flooded the mate bond. "You think strategically. Good. You're right. A public ceremony makes you officially untouchable. But are you sure? 3 weeks isn't much time to prepare." Lira met his eyes steadily and nodded. She was sure. Scared? Yes. Overwhelmed? Absolutely. But sure, because the alternative was staying in the shadows, staying vulnerable, staying invisible. And Kale had promised her she'd never be invisible again. 3 weeks then, Kale confirmed. Sage, what does she need to be fully recovered by then? Rest, proper nutrition, gentle exercise after the first week. Sage handed Lira a vial of dark liquid. "Drink this twice daily. It'll speed the healing and strengthen your Omega Wolf. You've been suppressing her with herbs for years. She needs time to emerge properly." Lira took the vial with shaking hands, her wolf. She'd kept her buried so deep for so long, hidden beneath layers of suppression herbs and fear. What would it be like to finally let her out? "Your wolf is beautiful," Kale said quietly, and Lira realized he must have felt her anxiety through the bond. "I saw her briefly when the bond awakened. Silver and white, like moonlight. She's been trying to reach you for years." That was true. Lira had felt her wolf scratching at her consciousness, trying to break free, trying to claim their mate. But she'd pushed her down, terrified of being discovered. Will it hurt, letting her out after so long? Probably, Sage said honestly. But it's necessary. Your wolf is part of you, child. Suppressing her for years has damaged both of you. The healing needs to happen from the inside out. Lira nodded. She understood. It would hurt, but it would be worth it. Everything worth having seemed to involve pain first. Winter cleared her throat. "Alpha, the council is demanding an audience. They want to know about the conspiracy, about Matthias, about..." She glanced at Lira, "about the mate bond." Kale's expression hardened. "They can wait. They're threatening to call a vote of no confidence if you don't address them today. Let them try." Kale's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "Half the council just tried to assassinate me. The other half either knew and said nothing, or were too incompetent to notice. They have no ground to stand on. They're claiming you're compromised," Winter continued carefully, "that the mate bond has made you irrational, that taking a servant as Luna shows poor judgment." The fury that blazed through the mate bond from Kale's end was incandescent. Lira felt it like physical heat, watched his amber eyes bleed to wolf gold. "They dare. Kale." Sage's voice cut through his rage. "Destroying the council won't help. You need to show strength. Yes, but also control. Show them that finding your mate has made you stronger, not weaker." Kale took a deep breath, visibly forcing his wolf back. "You're right. Fine. I'll meet with them. But not alone." He looked at Lira. "If you're strong enough, I want you there. I want them to see you, to witness the mate bond, to understand that questioning you is questioning the moon goddess herself." Fear spiked through Lira's chest. Face the council? The powerful alphas and betas who'd barely noticed her existence for 5 years? Who would judge her, question her, look for any weakness to exploit? But Kale was right. This was about more than just her fear. This was about establishing her position, about showing strength, about refusing to hide anymore. Lira reached for the journal, her hand steadier now. "I'll come. But I need clothes, not servants' rags." Winter's smile was fierce. "Leave that to me. I'll have something appropriate ready within the hour." As Winter left to arrange Lira's wardrobe, Sage finished her examination and departed with instructions for rest and medication. That left Kale and Lira alone in the quiet of his chambers. Kale settled back in the chair beside the bed, but his hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. The mate bond hummed with contentment at the simple touch. "I know this is overwhelming," he said quietly. "Yesterday you were a kitchen servant, invisible and safe. Today you're my mate, future Luna, about to face down a hostile council. If you need more time," Lira squeezed his hand and shook her head. She picked up the journal with her free hand. "Been hiding for 17 years. For sank of those years, I've been near you, watching you carry everything alone, wishing I could help. Now I can. Won't waste this chance by being afraid." Kale lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth cascading through the bond. "You're extraordinary. I don't think you realize that yet, but you will. I'll make sure of it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, just existing together, learning the feel of the mate bond, the rhythm of each other's breathing, the simple miracle of not being alone anymore. Finally, Kale spoke again. "The conspirators, Matthias and the others, they'll stand trial publicly. The pack needs to see justice done. But I need to know. Do you want to testify? Or would you prefer to remain uninvolved?" Lira considered. Part of her wanted to hide, to let others handle it, to stay safely in the background. But that was the old Lira. The invisible one. The one who'd accepted being overlooked because it meant being safe. She wasn't that person anymore. She wrote, "I'll testify. They need to see that threatening me means threatening you. That I'm not a weapon to be used. That I have value beyond being invisible." "You do," Kale said fiercely. "You have more value than all of them combined." A knock at the door interrupted them. Winter returned carrying a dress of deep midnight blue, elegant but not ostentatious. Silver embroidery traced the neckline and sleeves wolf designs that marked it as clothing suitable for future Luna. Sage said to help her dress carefully. Winter reported, "Her muscles are still healing. Don't want to tear anything." Kale stood reluctantly, releasing Lyra's hand. "I'll step outside. Take your time. The council can wait." But before he left, he turned back. May Lyra's eyes with absolute certainty burning in his own. "When we face them, remember this. You are my mate. The moon goddess chose you. Anyone who challenges that challenges divine will. And I will destroy anyone who threatens you. Completely. Without mercy." It wasn't a comforting promise. It was a vow. One that sent both fear and fierce satisfaction through the mate bond. Because Lira had spent 17 years being powerless, being vulnerable, being someone who could be threatened and used with no consequences. She wasn't that person anymore. Now she had an alpha king who would burn down anyone who hurt her. And somehow, that felt exactly right. The council chamber felt like stepping into a den of predators. Lira had never been in this room before. Servants weren't allowed in the inner sanctum where the Alpha King's council debated policy and power. The space was circular, built from dark stone with high windows that let in pale morning light. 12 seats arranged in a semicircle faced a raised platform where Kale's throne sat carved from a single piece of black oak, imposing and cold. Normally, those 12 seats would be filled with the territory's most powerful wolves. Betas, high-ranking alphas, the Gamma, the head healer. Today, only 7 were occupied. 5 seats sat conspicuously empty, the conspirators currently occupying dungeon cells instead of positions of power. The 7 remaining council members rose as Kale entered, their expressions ranging from carefully neutral to barely concealed hostility. Lira walked, beside him, Winter a silent shadow at her back. Every step sent residual pain through her healing body, but she kept her spine straight, her chin up. She wore the midnight blue dress Winter had chosen, her silver blonde hair braided in a crown around her head, a style she'd seen noble wolves wear, but had never dared attempt herself. The mate mark on her neck, where Kale would eventually bite during the ceremony, was clearly visible. She looked like someone who belonged beside an Alpha King, even if she didn't feel like it yet. Alpha King Kale, Lord Brennan spoke first. He was the eldest council member, a silver-haired beta with shrewd gray eyes. "We're relieved to see you unharmed. The news of the assassination attempt has shaken the entire territory." "As it should," Kale said, his voice carrying absolute authority as he moved to his throne. He didn't sit immediately. Instead, he stood beside it, one hand resting on Lyra's lower back. A subtle claim that every wolf in the room could read clearly. "An attempt on my life was orchestrated by 5 of your fellow council members. That such a conspiracy could form under your noses speaks to either incompetence or complicity. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Lady Meredith, a sharp-featured alpha female who controlled the eastern forests, spoke carefully. We had no knowledge of Matthias's plan. Had we known? You would have done what? Cale interrupted, his amber eyes cold. Stopped him? Or joined him? Because from where I stand, the only reason half this council didn't participate is that they weren't invited, not because they wouldn't have considered it. Tense silence filled the chamber. The assassination attempt failed, Cale continued, because of one person. My mate. He guided Lira forward gently, presenting her to the council. Some of you may recognize her. She's worked in the palace kitchens for 5 years. Lira, the mute Omega you've all overlooked and ignored. Lira felt 7. A pairs of eyes assess her with new interest. She could read their thoughts clearly. This servant? The Alpha King's mate? Impossible. Matthias and his co-conspirators chose Lira specifically because they believed she was powerless. Cale said, and steel entered his voice. They threatened her, forced her to poison wine meant for me. They assumed her silence meant she was a perfect weapon, obedient, voiceless, disposable. Lord Brennan's eyes widened slightly. She was the one who... She drank the poison herself, Cale finished. Rather than let me die, she consumed enough concentrated wolfsbane to kill 3 alpha wolves. She nearly died saving my life. And in doing so, she revealed both the conspiracy and our mate bond. He pulled Lira closer, his arm around her waist now protective and possessive. Through the bond, she felt his carefully controlled rage at how the council was looking at her, like she was an interesting puzzle rather than a person, like she was still invisible, despite standing right in front of them. The mate bond is not in question, Cale said flatly. The moon goddess chose Lira for me. Any wolf who questions that questions divine will. Am I clear? Of course, Alpha, Lady Meredith said quickly. But her eyes remained calculating. However, there are practical concerns. Aluna needs to be able to address the pack, to conduct diplomacy, to represent the territory. How can a mute Omega? The growl that rumbled from Cale's chest made every wolf in the room freeze. Alpha command rolled off him in waves, pressing down on them with physical weight. Choose your next words very carefully, he said, each word precise and deadly. Because right now you're suggesting my mate is unfit to be Luna, and that is dangerously close to challenging me directly. Lira placed her hand on Cale's chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. Through the bond, she sent calm, understanding. They're scared, uncertain. Let me show them I'm not weak. She felt his surprise, then reluctant agreement. He stepped back slightly, giving her space to address the council herself. Lira pulled the journal from the pocket of her dress. Cale had made sure she had it and wrote quickly. When she finished, she held it up so everyone could see. I cannot speak, but I can write, sign, and communicate through the mate bond with your Alpha King. I've served this palace for 6 years, watching, learning, understanding pack dynamics better than most because I was invisible. I know which council members are loyal and which aren't. I know which servants are trustworthy and which sell information. I know the daily workings of this territory because no one noticed me enough to hide things from me. She turned the page and continued writing, her hand steady despite her racing heart. I may be mute, but I am not powerless. I am not stupid, and I am not unfit to be Luna. I proved that when I chose to die rather than let traitors murder my mate. What have any of you sacrificed for this territory? For your Alpha King? The silence that followed was profound. Lord Brennan recovered first. He stood slowly, then did something Lira never expected. He bowed, deeply, with genuine respect. You're right, Luna, he said, using the title deliberately. We have been blind. Forgive our hesitation. The circumstances are unusual, but your courage is not. Welcome. One by one, the other council members stood and bowed. Some with more sincerity than others, but they bowed nonetheless. Lady Meredith was the last to rise. The mating ceremony, I assume, will be held soon? 3 weeks, Cale confirmed. Under the full moon. The entire territory will be invited to witness. And the conspirators? Asked Commander Garrett, the grizzled warrior who led the territory's military forces. What justice will they face? Public trial in 2 days, Kale said. Every charge will be laid out. Every piece of evidence presented. The pack will see exactly what they tried to do and how they failed. Then they'll face execution for treason. All of them? Lady Meredith asked carefully. Even those who were merely complicit? Especially those. Kale's voice was uncompromising. They tried to force my mate to murder me. They threatened an Omega under my protection. They conspired to throw this territory into chaos and war. There is no mercy for traitors of that magnitude. Lira felt the absolute certainty through the mate bond. Kale meant every word. The conspirators would die, and he would show no remorse. Part of her, the part that had been threatened and used, felt savage satisfaction at that. Let them face the consequences of trying to make her a weapon. There's another matter, Lord Brennan said carefully. If Luna Lira has been hiding her Omega status for 5 years, how many others might be doing the same? How many Omegas are we failing to protect? It was a fair question, and one Lira had wondered herself. She wrote, quickly, I used herbs to suppress my scent because I was afraid. Afraid of being forced into a political mating. Afraid of being used as a pawn. The fact that I had to hide what I am for safety means this territory fails its most vulnerable members. She showed the journal to Kale first, giving him a chance to see it before the council. He read it, and something shifted in his expression: approval, mixed with determination. Lira is right, he said. This territory will be changing. Starting immediately, any Omega who chooses to reveal their status will be under direct royal protection. No forced matings, no political pawns. They'll have autonomy over their own lives and choices. That's unprecedented, Lady Meredith said slowly. Omegas have always been treated as commodities, Kale interrupted coldly, as bargaining chips in political alliances, as prize to be won or weapons to be used. That ends now. My mate nearly died because she was vulnerable and powerless. I will not allow that to happen to anyone else in my territory. Commander Garrett nodded slowly. A strong policy. It will make our territory attractive to Omegas from other regions. Could increase our population significantly. And it's the right thing to do, Kale added. Which should be reason enough. Lira felt warmth bloom in her chest. This was why she'd been willing to die for him. Because beneath the cold exterior and the reputation for ruthlessness, Kale genuinely cared about protecting his people, about justice, about doing what was right, even when it was difficult. He would make a good king. And maybe, just maybe, she could help him be an even better one. If there's nothing else, Kale said, clearly ready to end the meeting, this council is dismissed. I'll send word when the trial date is finalized. I expect all of you in attendance. The council members filed out, some casting curious glances at Lira, others carefully avoiding looking at her at all. When the chamber finally emptied, leaving only Kale, Lira, and Winter, Kale's shoulders sagged slightly with exhaustion. Well, Winter said dryly, that went better than expected. Only 2 of them looked like they wanted to challenge you directly. Lady Meredith and Lord Theron, Kale confirmed. There'll be problems eventually, but not today. He turned to Lira, his expression softening. Are you all right? I know that was difficult. Lira nodded, though in truth, she was trembling. The adrenaline that had carried her through the council meeting was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Her body reminded her sharply that she was still recovering from near-fatal poisoning. Kale noticed immediately. Back to bed. Now. Sage will have my head if I've pushed you too hard. I'll have your head myself, came Sage's voice from the doorway. The elderly healer entered with a disapproving expression. The girl should be resting, not facing down hostile council members. What were you thinking? That. She needed to establish her position before rumors could spread, Kale said, already scooping Lira into his arms. She should have protested she could walk, but honestly, being carried sounded much better than forcing her shaking legs to function. She rested her head against Kale's chest, listening to his heartbeat. Through the mate bond, she felt his concern for her, his pride in how she'd handled the council, his determination to protect her from any future threats. The trial will be harder, Sage warned as they walked. Matthias will try to paint her as complicit. He'll claim she willingly participated in the conspiracy until the last moment. Let him try, Kale said darkly. Every wolf in this territory will hear how he threatened her, how he used her silence against her, how he tried to turn my mate into a weapon. Back in Kale's chambers, he laid Lira carefully on the bed and personally helped Sage check her vitals. The healer sked over her elevated heart rate and the tremor in her hands. Pushing too hard, too fast, Sage muttered, mixing a tea that smelled of chamomile and something medicinal. "Drink this. It'll help with the shaking and let you rest." Lira obeyed, sipping the bitter tea slowly. Kale sat on the edge of the bed, one hand resting on her ankle, a simple touch, but one that grounded her through the mate bond. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "The way you stood up to them, showed them you weren't weak or powerless. I've never been more proud of anyone." Lira managed a tired smile. She reached for the journal, but her hands were shaking too badly to write. "Rest first," Kale said gently. "Whatever you need to say can wait." But Lira shook her head. This was important. She forced her trembling hand to form shaky letters. "Thank you for defending me, for believing I could face them, for not treating me like I'm fragile." "You're not fragile," Kale said firmly. "You're healing from a traumatic injury, yes. But fragile? No. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, Lira. You've survived things that would have broken most wolves." He paused, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her ankle. "But you don't have to be strong every moment. You can rest now. Let me protect you while you heal. That's what mates do, we take turns being strong for each other." The simple truth of that statement made Lyra's eyes burn with unshed tears. For 17 years, she'd had no one to be strong for her, no one to share her burdens. She'd been alone with her silence, her fear, her determination to survive. Now she had someone who saw her, who valued her, who would fight for her, who would let her fight alongside him when she was ready. The mate bond hummed with contentment, as exhaustion finally pulled Lira under. Her last conscious thought was of Kale's hand on her ankle, warm and solid and real. She wasn't alone anymore, and she never would be again. The trial, 2 days later, was held in the pack's great arena, a massive outdoor space that could hold thousands of wolves. Every member of the territory who could attend was there, filling the stone seats in rows that climbed toward the sky. Lira stood on the raised platform beside Kale's throne, Winter and Stone flanking her. She wore a dress of silver and white now, with the royal crest embroidered over her heart. Her mate mark was visible, and her silver blonde hair flowed loose. Kale had asked her to wear it down, said it looked like moonlight. She felt exposed, vulnerable. Thousands of eyes were on her, assessing, judging, wondering. But Kale's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining, and the mate bond steadied her. "You're not alone," he sent through the connection. "I'm here. I've got you." The 5 conspirators were brought out in chains: Matthias, Lord Theron, Lady Cassandra, Commander Vale, and a minor alpha named Riker. They looked defiant, angry, unrepentant. Matthias's eyes found Lira, immediately. Even in chains, even facing execution, he sneered at her, like she was still just a powerless servant who didn't matter. Stone stepped forward to read the charges. His deep voice carried across the arena, listing every crime in brutal detail: conspiracy to commit regicide, treason against the crown, threatening and coercing a royal mate, attempted use of wolfsbane poison, plotting to destabilize the territory. "How do you plead?" Stone demanded. "Not guilty," Matthias said immediately. "The little Omega was part of it. She poisoned the wine willingly, then got cold feet at the last second. She's playing the victim now to save herself." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lira felt rage flood through the mate bond from Kale's end, but he kept his expression controlled. "You claim Luna Lira was complicit?" Kale asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I claim she's a lying little servant who—" "Careful," Kale interrupted. An alpha command made every wolf in the arena freeze. "You're speaking about my mate, the Luna of this territory. The wolf chosen for me by the moon goddess herself. If you're claiming she's a liar, you're claiming the mate bond itself is false." Matthias paled slightly, realizing his mistake. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. "I'm saying she's manipulating you, using the mate bond to—" "Enough." Kale stood, and his presence seemed to fill the entire arena. "You threatened my mate, told her you'd expose her Omega status if she didn't poison my wine, told her the court alphas would use her if she were cast out. You made her believe she had no choice. He gestured, and Winter brought forward a small wooden box. From it, she pulled the empty vial that had contained the wolfsbane. This vial contains residue of the poison you gave Lira, Kale continued. Sage has confirmed it matches the poison in the wine. Your scent is all over it, Matthias. There's no denying you prepared it. So what? Matthias snarled, dropping all pretense now. You're a terrible king. You've isolated yourself, refused to take a mate, turned down every political alliance. You're weak. The territory deserves better. The crowd erupted in angry shouts. Kale let them rage for a moment before raising his hand for silence. You call me weak, he said, his voice carrying clearly. Yet I'm still alive, and you're in chains. You call me a terrible king, yet you had to resort to poison and conspiracy because you couldn't challenge me directly. And you call my mate a liar, yet she's the one who saved my life by drinking poison meant to kill me. He looked out at the assembled pack, making sure everyone could hear. The evidence is overwhelming. 5 council members conspired to assassinate me, throw the territory into chaos, and seize power in the aftermath. They chose my mate as their weapon because they thought her silence made her powerless. They were wrong. Kale turned to Lira, extending his hand. She took it, let him guide her, and forward to stand beside him. Lira had every reason to let me die, Kale continued, his voice softer now but still carrying. I'd barely noticed her existence in 5 years. I'd never protected her, never valued her, never seen her. She owed me nothing. Yet when forced to poison my wine, she chose to drink it herself. She chose certain death over letting me be murdered. He raised their joined hands, showing the entire pack. That is loyalty. That is courage. That is the mark of a true Luna, someone who protects her mate and her pack, even at the cost of her own life. Anyone who questions her fitness to lead questions their own understanding of what leadership means. The crowd erupted in howls of approval. Not everyone Lira could see some wolves in the stands who looked uncertain or disapproving, but the majority were howling their acceptance. Their Luna had proven herself in the most fundamental way possible, through self-sacrifice. Matthias's expression twisted with impotent rage. You'll regret this, he spat. Making a mute servant your Luna will destroy your credibility. The other territories will see it as weakness. Then let them try to exploit it, Kale said coldly. They'll learn the same lesson you're about to. Underestimating my mate is the last mistake anyone makes. He nodded to Stone. The verdict is clear. All 5 conspirators are guilty of treason. The sentence is death by silver blade, to be carried out immediately. The crowd's howls intensified, some approving, some shocked, but none objecting loudly enough to matter. Lira watched as the 5 traitors were led to the execution platform. She should have felt satisfaction, maybe, or horror at watching wolves die. Instead, she felt nothing. Just a cold certainty that this was justice. They'd tried to kill her mate. They'd threatened her. They'd treated her like a disposable tool. They were facing the consequences of their choices. When the silver blade fell 5 times, ending 5 lives, Lira didn't look away. She watched, standing tall beside Kale, showing the pack that their Luna was not weak, not fragile, not someone who would break at the sight of harsh justice. After, when the arena emptied and they returned to the palace, Kale pulled Lira into his private study. The moment the door closed, he wrapped her in his arms, holding her tight. Are you all right? He asked quietly. That was brutal. If you need to. Lira pulled back slightly and reached for the journal she now carried everywhere. I'm fine. They chose their path. They faced justice. I won't lose sleep over wolves who tried to make me a murderer. Kale read it, then pressed a kiss to her forehead. You continue to amaze me. Most wolves would be shaken by witnessing executions, especially ones they were connected to. Lira wrote again. I've seen worse. Watched my parents die when I was 12. Watched rogues tear apart my family. This was justice, not senseless violence. I can accept that. You're remarkable, Kale murmured against her hair. And in 3 weeks, you'll officially be my Luna, my equal, my partner in all things. 3 weeks. The mating ceremony. When the bond would be complete, when she'd be permanently tied to this powerful, lonely alpha king who'd somehow become her everything. Lira wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready to step out of the shadows, ready to be seen, ready to be Luna, ready to help Kale build a territory where no one had to be invisible to be safe. She pulled out the journal one more time. 3 weeks can't come fast enough. I'm ready to be yours officially, ready to stand beside you always, ready to show this territory what a mute Omega can do when she's finally given a voice. Kale's smile was fierce and proud and full of love as he kissed her deeply, the mate bond singing between them with joy and promise and absolute certainty. They'd found each other against impossible odds. They'd survived poison, conspiracy, and their own loneliness. Now they'd face everything else together, and nothing, not hostile councils, not prejudiced wolves, not even their own doubts would ever tear them apart. The 3 weeks before the mating ceremony passed in a blur of preparation, healing, and transformation. Lira's body recovered slowly but steadily. Sage's treatments worked, strengthening her Omega wolf that had been suppressed for so long. Each day, Lira felt her returning stronger, clearer, desperate to finally be free. The herbs she'd used for years had nearly destroyed her wolf's ability to emerge, but now, with proper care and the mate bond supporting her, she was healing from the inside out. The physical recovery was the easy part. The harder challenge was learning to be Luna. Winter became her constant companion and unlikely friend. The fierce Beta taught Lira everything she needed to know: pack politics, territorial alliances, the complex web of relationships that held the northern White Peaks together. They developed a system of hand signs that allowed quick, private communication during meetings. Winter never once treated Lira's muteness as a limitation, only as a different way of speaking. "You're a natural strategist," Winter said one afternoon, as they reviewed territorial maps in the study. "You see patterns others miss, probably because you spent 5 years watching and listening while everyone else was too busy talking." Lira smiled and signed. Being invisible had some advantages. "Not invisible anymore," Winter replied. "The entire territory knows about you now. The mute Omega who drank poison to save her Alpha King. You're already a legend." That was both thrilling and terrifying. Lira still wasn't used to being seen, to having her presence matter. She caught servants and guards bowing to her in the corridors now, showing respect she'd never imagined receiving. Some looked at her with genuine admiration, others with barely concealed resentment, wolves who thought a servant. They had no business becoming Luna. She tried not to let the hostile stares bother her, tried to remember what Kale kept telling her through the mate bond. "You earned this. You proved yourself. Anyone who can't see that doesn't matter." The nights were the best part. Kale insisted Lira continue sleeping in his chambers properly, with him in a separate room until the mating ceremony made everything official. But they spent hours together each evening, talking through the mate bond, with Lira writing in her journal, with Kale reading reports aloud and asking her opinion on policy decisions. He valued her input, actually listened when she suggested changes or pointed out potential problems. More than once, her observations prevented disasters that even his experienced council members had missed. "You see things differently," Kale explained one night as they sat by the fire. "You notice the details everyone else overlooks: the servant who's nervous, the guard who's lying, the council member whose loyalty is wavering. You spent 5 years being invisible, watching everything. That's not a weakness, Lira. It's a gift." She wrote in her journal, "I never thought of it that way. Always saw my silence as something broken, something wrong. It's not broken. It's just different." Kale took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "And different is exactly what this territory needs. I've been ruling alone for too long, making decisions without input, building walls that kept everyone out. You're teaching me it's okay to let people in, okay to trust, okay to share the burden." Through the mate bond, Lira felt the truth of his words, felt how much lighter he seemed now, how the decade of crushing loneliness had begun to lift. He smiled more, slept better. Even the servants had noticed the change in their Alpha King. Finding his mate had saved him in more ways than just preventing assassination. 10 days before the ceremony, Sage declared Lira's wolf ready to emerge. "It won't be easy," the healer warned. "Years of suppression means she'll come out wild, desperate. You'll need to be ready." They went to the forest clearing at dawn, just Lira, Kale, Winter, and Sage. The morning air was crisp and cold, the ground covered in fresh snow. Lira stood in the center of the clearing, wearing simple clothes that could be easily removed. "Remember," Sage instructed, "your wolf isn't your enemy. She's been trying to reach you for years. When she emerges, don't fight her. Let her run, let her be free. Trust her." Lira nodded, though anxiety twisted in her stomach. What if her wolf was too feral after being suppressed so long? What if she couldn't control her? "I'll be here," Kale sent through the bond. "Right beside you. You're not alone in this." That steadied her. Lira closed her eyes, reached deep inside herself to where her wolf waited, and finally, let go of the fear that had kept her buried. The shift hit her like lightning. Pain exploded through every nerve as bones reformed, as muscles stretched, as her body transformed for the first time in 5 years. Lira wanted to scream, but couldn't, not in human form, not in wolf form. She'd never had a voice to express pain, but her wolf did. The howl that tore from her throat was primal, anguished, desperate. Years of suppressed rage and grief and loneliness poured out in that single sound. The forest seemed to hold its breath, listening to the mute Omega finally finding her voice, not in words, but in the raw emotion of her wolf's cry. When the shift completed, Lira stood on 4 legs, panting. She looked down at herself and saw silver-white fur, exactly as Kale had described. Her paws were small but strong, her body lean and built for speed rather than power. She was beautiful, and she could finally move the way she was meant to. Lira took off running. She tore through the forest, reveling in the feeling of freedom, of strength, of being whole for the first time in years. Snow flew beneath her paws. Wind rushed through her fur. Her wolf song with joy, finally free, finally alive. Behind her, she heard another howl, deeper, more powerful. Kale had shifted to follow her. His wolf was massive, with fur the color of midnight and silver, amber eyes that tracked her every movement. He was the most magnificent thing Lira had ever seen. Her mate, her alpha, the wolf the moon goddess had chosen for her. They ran together through the forest, not speaking, they couldn't, not as wolves but communicating through the mate bond. Pure emotion, pure joy, pure connection. Lira had never felt so free, so right. This was what she'd been missing all these years. When they finally stopped in a clearing, both panting from exertion, Kale's wolf approached slowly, carefully, giving her time to accept his presence. He was so much larger than her, could easily overpower her if he chose. But there was only gentleness in the way he nuzzled her neck, only tenderness in how he carefully licked the silver fur behind her ear. Mate behavior, claiming behavior, but soft and asking rather than demanding. Lira's wolf responded instinctively, pressing closer, rubbing her scent against his. "Mine," her wolf declared through the bond. "Mine, mine, mine." "Yes," Kale's wolf agreed. "Yours, always yours." They returned to the clearing where Winter and Sage waited. Both women looked relieved as Lira shifted back to human form, easier this time, more natural. Her body remembered now, knew how to move between forms. "Your wolf is beautiful," Sage said warmly. "And strong. The suppression didn't damage her permanently. She'll only get stronger from here." "Can she?" Lira signed hesitantly. "Can my wolf speak? Through the bond?" "Eventually, yes," Sage confirmed. "Right now she's still adjusting, still learning. But in time, she'll be able to communicate with Kale's wolf directly through your mate bond. It's rare, but powerful to have 2 forms of connection." Over the Plide, next days, Lira practiced shifting, getting comfortable in her wolf form, learning to control her, to merge their consciousness instead of fighting for dominance. It was like learning to breathe again, difficult at first, then gradually natural. And every time she shifted, Kale ran with her, teaching her to hunt, to track, to read the forest the way wolves were meant to. They were building their bond not just emotionally and physically, but in every form they could take. 3 days before the ceremony, the dress arrived. Winter brought it to Lira's temporary chambers. She'd finally been given her own suite, though she still spent most nights in Kale's sitting room, the 2 of them reluctant to be apart even for sleeping. The dress was a masterpiece, pure white silk that seemed to shimmer silver in certain light, with intricate embroidery depicting wolves running through forests of moonlight. The neckline was designed to show the mate mark Kale would give her. The sleeves were long and elegant, the skirt flowing and ethereal. "The pack seamstress worked on it constantly," Winter said. "They wanted it perfect for their Luna. Lira touched the fabric reverently. She'd never owned anything so beautiful. Never imagined she would. "They're Luna," she thought, still getting used to the title. "I'm really going to be their Luna." "You already are," Winter said, reading her expression. "The ceremony just makes it official. But you've been acting as Luna for weeks now, attending councils, making decisions, protecting the pack. You've earned the title 10 times over." The night before the ceremony, Lira couldn't sleep. She sat in Kale's study, wrapped in furs by the fire, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow the mate bond would be complete. Tomorrow she'd be Luna in truth, not just in name. What if she failed? What if she couldn't live up to what the pack needed? "What if you're spiraling?" Kale's voice came from the doorway. He entered quietly, settling beside her on the floor by the fire. "I can feel it through the bond. What are you afraid of?" Lira reached for her ever-present journal. "Afraid I'll let you down. Afraid I'm not strong enough, smart enough, worthy enough. Afraid everyone will realize you made a mistake choosing me." Kale read it, then cupped her face gently. "Look at me, Lira." She did. Those amber eyes held absolute certainty. "I didn't choose you. The moon goddess did. And she doesn't make mistakes." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But more than that, you've already proven yourself 100 times over. You saved my life. You faced down a hostile council. You testified at the trial. You've been learning politics and strategy faster than anyone I've ever seen. You're not failing. You're thriving. But what if—" "No," KL interrupted firmly. "No more what ifs. Tomorrow, we complete the bond. Tomorrow, you become my Luna officially. And I promise you, Lira, you will be the greatest Luna this territory has ever known. Not because you can speak, you can't. Not because you're from a noble bloodline, you're not. But because you understand what it means to be overlooked, to be vulnerable, to need protection. You'll fight for every wolf in this pack, the way you fought to save me. And that makes you perfect." Tears slipped down Lyra's cheeks. Kale caught them gently, then kissed her soft and sweet, and full of promise. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I loved you when you were invisible. I loved you when you drank poison for me. I loved you when you faced the council despite being terrified. I love every part of you, Lira. Your silence, your strength, your courage, your kindness, all of it." Through the mate bond, she felt the truth of every word, felt the depth of his love, his pride, his absolute certainty that they belonged together. Lira couldn't speak the words back, but she poured everything into the bond, all her love, her gratitude, her fierce determination to be worthy of him, to be the Luna he deserved, to build a life and a pack and a future together. "I love you too," she sent through the bond. "More than I ever thought possible. You gave me back my voice, even though I can't speak. You made me visible when I'd spent years disappearing. You chose me when I was nobody. I'll spend forever showing you that was the right choice." They held each other by the firelight, the mate bond humming with contentment, until finally Lyra's exhaustion caught up with her. Kale carried her to her bed, in her own chambers, because tradition demanded they spend the night before the ceremony apart. "Tomorrow," he promised at her doorway, "you'll never sleep alone again. Tomorrow, the mating ceremony." Lira had never been more ready for anything in her life. The full moon rose over the northern white peaks, massive and silver, bathing the ceremony grounds in ethereal light. Thousands of wolves gathered the entire territory and representatives from neighboring packs. They filled the ancient stone amphitheater that had hosted mating ceremonies for centuries, their combined presence electric with anticipation. Lira stood in the preparation chamber, Winter and Sage helping her into the ceremonial dress. Her hands trembled as they arranged the silk, braided crystals and moonflowers into her silver blonde hair. "Breathe," Winter instructed gently. "You're going to be magnificent. Every wolf out there is already in love with you," Sage added. "They're calling you the Poison Luna, the one who drank death to save her king. Songs are already being written. You're a legend, child." Lira managed a shaky smile. She caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The mute servant who'd scrubbed floors was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she belonged beside an alpha king, someone who looked like a Luna. The drums began deep, resonant, calling everyone to attention. It was time. Winter led her through the corridors to the entrance of the amphitheater. The moon hung directly overhead now, perfectly positioned. Through the mate bond, Lira felt Kyle waiting at the center of the ceremony grounds, felt his anticipation matching her own. The drums shifted rhythm, and the crowd fell silent. Lira stepped into the amphitheater. The sight stole her breath. Thousands of wolves, all facing her, all seeing her. Not invisible anymore, not overlooked. Every eye tracked her progress as she walked the long path to the center where Kale waited. He stood beside the ancient altar stone, wearing ceremonial furs that marked him as Alpha King. His dark hair gleamed in the moonlight. His amber eyes tracked her every step. He looked powerful and regal and slightly overwhelmed, like he couldn't quite believe she was real, that this was happening. Through the bond, Lira felt his emotions. Love, pride, wonder, and bone-deep relief that tomorrow they'd never be alone again. When she reached him, Kale extended his hand. She took it, and the mate bond flared bright enough that several wolves in the front rows gasped. They could see it, the golden thread connecting Alpha King and Luna, visible in the moonlight, proof of divine blessing. Sage stepped forward, raising her hands for silence, though the crowd was already quiet. We gather under the full moon, her voice carried across the amphitheater, to witness the completion of a bond blessed by the moon goddess herself. Alpha King Kale and Luna Lira have been tested by poison, by conspiracy, by doubt, and fear. They have survived what would have destroyed lesser wolves. Tonight, they claim each other before the pack and the goddess. Let any who would object speak now or hold their peace forever. Silence. Perfect. Absolute silence. No one objected. No one dared. Then we proceed. Sage turned to Kale. Alpha King, speak your vows. Kale took both of Lyra's hands, his grip warm and steady. When he spoke, his voice carried, with alpha command, ensuring every wolf heard clearly. I, Kale, Alpha King of the Northern White Peaks, claim you, Lira, as my mate and Luna. For 5 years, you were invisible to me, and I was too blind to see the gift the moon goddess had placed in my path. You served me with quiet loyalty, watched over me when I didn't know I needed watching, and when faced with impossible choice, you chose to die rather than let harm come to me. His eyes blazed with emotion as he continued. You are the bravest wolf I have ever known, the strongest Luna this territory could ask for, the one person who understands my loneliness because you've carried your own. I vow to protect you with my life, to honor your silence as the gift it is, to listen when you speak through signs or writing or the mate bond. I vow to stand beside you as equal partner, to value your counsel, to build a territory where every wolf, especially the most vulnerable, is protected and valued. I vow to love you until my last breath and beyond. Before the moon goddess and this pack, I claim you as mine. The crowd erupted in howls of approval, thousands of voices joining together in celebration. When silence returned, Sage turned to Lira. Luna, if you cannot speak your vows, you may write them or sign them. The moon goddess hears hearts, not just voices. But Lira had prepared for this moment. She released Kale's hands and pulled a folded parchment from her sleeve, the vows she'd spent days writing, every word chosen carefully. She handed it to Sage, who unfolded it and began to read aloud on Lyra's behalf. I, Lira, accept you, Kale, as my mate and king. When I had nothing, no voice, no family, no status, you gave me everything. You saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I thought I was worthless. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You turned my greatest weakness into strength, my silence into a different kind of voice. Sage's voice carried warmth as she continued, reading, I vow to stand beside you as Luna, to protect this pack with the same fierce loyalty I showed when I drank poison for you. I vow to be your equal partner, to share your burdens, to remind you you're not alone when the darkness comes. I vow to use my silence as a gift to listen when others won't, to notice what others miss, to give voice to the voiceless. I vow to love you with everything I am, in every form I take, until the moon goddess calls me home. Before the goddess and this pack, I accept you as mine. Kale's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Through the bond, Lira felt his overwhelming emotion: pride, love, gratitude, joy. Sage set the parchment aside. The vows have been spoken and accepted. Now comes the marking, the physical claim that completes the mate bond. Alpha King, mark your Luna. Kale moved closer, one hand cradling Lira's face, the other tilting her head to expose her neck. The mate mark would go there, on the junction between neck and shoulder, a permanent claim visible to every wolf. "This might hurt," he whispered, quiet enough only she could hear. "But I'll be as gentle as I can." Lira signed quickly. "I trust you. Make me yours." Cale's eyes flashed wolf gold. He leaned in, pressed a kiss to the spot he'd mark, then bit down. The pain was sharp, but brief. Then pleasure flooded through the mate bond, as the marking took hold, as Cale's claiming mixed with her acceptance. Lira felt the bond complete fully, permanently, irrevocably. They were mated now in the eyes of the pack, the goddess, and nature itself. When Cale pulled back, Lira saw her blood on his lips. He looked almost feral with possession and satisfaction. "Now the Luna marks her alpha," Sage instructed. "Though she need not break skin, the intent is what matters." Lira knew what to do. She rose on her toes. Cale was so much taller, and he bent obligingly, offering his neck. She pressed her lips to the same spot where she'd mark him if she could, then opened her mouth and bit down gently. Not hard enough to draw blood with her human teeth, but hard enough to leave a mark, to show intent, to claim him as thoroughly as he'd claimed her. The bond blazed bright as the sun. Golden light erupted from where they touched, spreading outward in waves. Every wolf in the amphitheater felt it, the power of a completed mate bond, blessed by the moon goddess herself. Some of the nearest wolves fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the divine presence. When the light faded, Sage's voice rang out with authority. "The bond is complete. Before the moon goddess and this pack, I declare Cale and Lira mated and bound. Let any who would harm this union face divine judgment." The pack erupted in celebration. Howls, cheers, stomping feet, thousands of wolves expressing their joy and acceptance. Their alpha king finally had his Luna. Their Luna had proven herself worthy beyond any doubt. Cale pulled Lira into his arms, kissing her deeply as the pack celebrated. Around them, through the mate bond, now complete and permanent, Lira felt everything. His love, his pride, his overwhelming relief that she was his forever, his determination to spend every day proving she'd made the right choice. "I love you," she sent through the bond. "My mate, my king, my home. I love you," he returned. "My Luna, my salvation, my everything." The celebration feast lasted hours. Long tables were laden with food and drink. Music played, wolves danced and sung, children ran laughing through the crowd. It was the biggest celebration the northern White Peaks had seen in decades. Lira sat beside Cale at the high table, wearing his mark with pride, feeling the mate bond hum with contentment. Various pack members approached throughout the night to offer congratulations, gifts, pledges of loyalty. An elderly Omega woman approached timidly, bowing low. "Luna," she said softly, "thank you. For what you said about protecting Omegas. For the new laws. My granddaughter won't have to hide what she is like I did. Like you did. You've given us hope." Lira took the woman's weathered hand and squeezed gently. She pulled out the small journal she now carried always, and wrote quickly. "Every Omega in this territory will be protected. We'll have choices. We'll matter. I promise." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Bless you, Luna. Bless you." Similar encounters happened throughout the night. Omegas thanking her for giving them a voice. Servants expressing gratitude that one of their own had risen so high. Wolves who'd felt invisible or overlooked finding hope in her story. "You're changing this territory already," Cale murmured against her ear. "Giving hope to wolves who'd given up. That's what a Luna does. Protects, inspires, leads." As midnight approached, Cale stood, offering his hand. "Ready to leave? The celebration will continue without us." Lira took his hand eagerly. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, ready to finally be alone with her mate. They slipped away, and from the feast, Winter and Stone, ensuring no one followed. The walk back to the palace felt surreal, the weight of the ceremony, the completion of the bond, the reality that everything had changed. In Cale's chambers, their chambers now, they finally had privacy. "Luna Lira," Cale said, testing out the full title. "How does it feel?" Lira pulled out her journal, writing quickly. "Terrifying. Overwhelming. Right. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She paused, then added, "For 17 years, I was voiceless and invisible. You gave me back both. You saw me when no one else did. You valued my silence instead of seeing it as broken. You made me believe I could be more than a servant, more than a victim, more than someone defined by trauma." Tears tracked down her cheeks as she continued writing. "I was ready to die for you. I drank poison because letting you live mattered more than my own survival. But you saved me. You gave me life, purpose, love. You made me Luna. You made me whole." Cale read every word, his own eyes shimmering with emotion. When she finished, he took the journal gently and set it aside. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was precious and irreplaceable. "You saved me too," he whispered. "I was dead inside, Lira, frozen, locked in grief and loneliness I thought would never end. Then you drank poison for me, and the mate bond awakened, and suddenly I wasn't alone anymore. You gave me back my life, my purpose, my ability to feel anything beyond duty and responsibility." He pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "We saved each other. That's what mates do. That's what we'll keep doing, every day for the rest of our lives. When you're weak, I'll be strong. When I'm lost, you'll guide me. Together, we're unbreakable." Lira reached up, touching the mate mark on his neck, her claim on him, permanent and visible. Through the bond she sent everything words could never express: her love, her gratitude, her fierce determination to be worthy of him, her absolute certainty that they belonged together. "Forever," she sent through the bond. "You're mine forever." "Forever," he agreed, and kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. The mate bond song between them, complete and perfect and unbreakable. 5 years later, Lira stood on the balcony of the palace, watching her territory thrive below. The northern white peaks had changed dramatically since the mating ceremony. Omega protection laws had transformed the territory into a haven for vulnerable wolves. The population had nearly doubled as Omegas from other regions migrated, seeking safety and autonomy. The art school Lira had founded teaching children to communicate through drawing, painting, sculpture, had become renowned across all territories. Young wolves who struggled with traditional communication learned to express themselves in other ways, discovering gifts they'd never known they had. Sign language had become standard. Education for all pack children. Silence was no longer seen as disability, but simply as a different way of being. "Luna," a young voice called from below. Lira looked down to see her daughter, Mira, waving enthusiastically. At 3 years old, the girl was already showing signs of inheriting her father's strength and her mother's keen observation skills. Beside Mira stood her twin brother, Ash, quieter but equally perceptive. He signed up to his mother. "Papa says dinner is ready, and he made your favorite." Lira smiled and signed back. "Tell him I'm coming." She took one last look at her territory now, as much as Cale's, and felt pride swell in her chest. This was what they'd built together. A place where every wolf mattered, where silence and speech held equal value, where vulnerability was protected rather than exploited. She'd come so far from the terrified servant who'd scrubbed floors and tried to disappear, from the Omega who'd drunk poison because she saw no other choice. Now she was Luna, mother, leader, voice for the voiceless. And she'd found her voice not in spoken words, which still wouldn't come and probably never would, but in every other way that mattered. Through her mate, who heard her silent thoughts and valued them above the loudest speech. Through her children, who were learning that communication took many forms. Through her territory, which had transformed because she'd refused to stay invisible. "I'm coming," she sent through the mate bond to Cale. "We're waiting," he returned, and she felt his love warm as sunlight. "We'll always wait for you. You're worth waiting for." Lira descended from the balcony, heading toward the dining hall where her family waited. Her mate, her children, her pack. She'd been forced to serve poison to the Alpha King, had drunk it herself to save him, and in doing so, had found everything she'd ever needed. Love, purpose, home, a voice that needed no words to be heard, and the absolute certainty that she'd never ever be invisible again. 10 years after the mating ceremony, Lira sat in her private study, the room Cale had converted for her on their 5th anniversary. The walls were covered with maps, correspondence from other territories, and drawings from the art school students. Her desk held journals filled with observations, strategies, and and the careful notes she used to govern alongside her mate. She was reviewing requests from 3 different territories, all asking for guidance on implementing Omega protection laws, similar to those in the northern White Peaks, when familiar footsteps approached. Kale entered without knocking. After a decade of mating, they'd long since abandoned formalities when alone. He looked older now, silver threading more prominently through his dark hair, but the amber eyes that found her were as warm as ever. Busy? He sought through the mate bond, which had only grown stronger over the years. Lira held up 3 fingers, then pointed to the requests on her desk. More territories wanting to follow our model, Kale observed, reading over her shoulder. That's the 5th request this month. You're changing the entire region, Lira. 1 territory at a time. She wrote quickly in her ever-present journal. We're changing it. This was never just me. It started with you, Kale insisted, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Your courage inspired all of this. 10 years ago, you were invisible. Now, territories across the region look to you for guidance. The Poison Luna has become legend. Lira made a face at the nickname. She'd never liked it, even though she understood why it stuck. The story of the mute Omega, who drank poison to save her Alpha King, had spread far beyond the northern White Peaks. Ballads were sung about it. Young wolves told the tale to their children. She'd become a symbol of loyalty, courage, and the strength that existed in unexpected places. Sometimes I miss being invisible, she wrote with a slight smile. Life was simpler. Lonely, though? Kale pointed out. He pulled up a chair beside her. And you wouldn't trade what we have now. I know you wouldn't. He was right, of course. The mate bond meant he could feel the contentment that filled her life now. The satisfaction of meaningful work, the joy of their children, the deep love that had only grown stronger over a decade together. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mama? Papa? Mira's voice called. Grandmother Sage says you need to come to the healing center. There's someone who needs to meet you. Lira and Kale exchanged glances. Sage rarely interrupted them unless something was important. They found Sage in the main healing room, standing beside a young girl who couldn't be more than 14. The child was thin, trembling, with dark bruises marking her arms and a haunted look in her eyes. An Omega, Lira realized immediately, one who'd been badly hurt. This is Vera, Sage explained gently. She walked here from the eastern lowlands. 3 weeks of travel, alone, following stories she'd heard about the northern White Peaks, about a Luna who protects Omegas. The girl's eyes found Lira and widened with recognition. You're her, Vera whispered. The Poison Luna, the one who couldn't speak but found her voice anyway. Lira knelt slowly, bringing herself to the girl's eye level. She could see the fear, the desperate hope, the exhaustion of someone who'd risked everything for a chance at safety. She knew that feeling intimately. What happened? Lira signed, knowing the girl probably didn't understand the language yet, but hoping her expression conveyed care. My pack wanted to sell me, Vera said, voice breaking, to an alpha from a neighboring territory, for political alliance. I said no, but they didn't care. So I ran. I heard stories about a place where Omegas could choose their own mates, where they weren't property, where a mute Luna proved that being different didn't mean being worthless. Tears tracked down the girl's face. I don't have anywhere else to go. If you send me back, they'll... Lira stood and wrapped the girl in a fierce embrace, cutting off the panicked words. Through gesture and expression, she conveyed what words couldn't. You're safe now. You're home. No one will hurt you here. You're under royal protection, Kale said, his alpha command making it absolute and binding. Anyone who tries to claim you, sell you, or force you into anything will answer directly to me. You're safe here, Vera. That's a promise. The girl collapsed against Lira, sobbing with relief. Lira held her, remembering being 12 years old and losing everything, remembering being 18 and nearly dying, remembering being 23 and drinking poison because she'd seen no other choice. She'd been where this girl was terrified, vulnerable, certain she had no value beyond what others could use her for, but she'd found safety, found a mate who valued her, found a purpose that transformed her from victim to protector. Now she'd make sure every Omega who came to her territory found the same. Over the next weeks, Vera slowly healed. She learned sign language with remarkable speed, studied in the art school, and began training with Winter's Guard unit, discovering a talent for strategy that reminded everyone of Lira herself. She's going to be formidable, Winter observed one afternoon, watching Vera practice defensive moves. Give her a few years, and she'll probably want to join the Luna's personal guard. Lira smiled. Her personal guard had grown to 20 wolves, all of them formerly vulnerable Omegas, who'd found strength through protection and training. They called themselves the Silent Shadows, and they were fiercely loyal to their Luna who'd shown them a different path. That evening, as Lira and Kale watched the sunset from their private balcony, she pulled out her journal. She'd been thinking about Vera, about all the Omegas they'd helped over the 18 years, about how far she'd come from that terrified servant. She wrote, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Matthias had never threatened me? If I'd never been forced to poison the wine?" Kale read it and pulled her closer. "Sometimes, but I think the moon goddess always had a plan. Maybe it wouldn't have been poison. Maybe it would have been something else. But I believe we were always meant to find each other." He paused, his thumb tracing the mate mark on her neck, 10 years old but still as vivid as the day he'd given it to her. "You drinking that poison was the worst and best thing that ever happened to me," he continued quietly. "Worst because I nearly lost you before I even knew I'd found you. Best because it shattered every wall I'd built, forced me to feel again, to connect again, to recognize what the goddess had given me." Through the mate bond, Lira felt the absolute truth of his words, felt his love, unwavering and fierce after a decade together. "I would do it again," she sent through the bond. "Drink the poison again, face the council again, all of it, because it led here. To you, to our children, to this life where I finally matter. You always mattered," Kale said firmly. "You just needed someone to see it. And you needed someone who understood silence," Lira countered. "Who wouldn't fill every moment with noise. Who could sit with you in grief and loneliness, and just exist together." "We saved each other," Kale agreed, as he had countless times over the years. "And now we save others. That's our legacy, Lira. Not just the laws or the art school or the protection we offer. It's showing every vulnerable wolf in this region that they matter. That being different is a strength, not a weakness. That silent voices can change the world." Below them, the territory spread out in twilight beauty. Lira could see wolves moving through the streets, some speaking, some signing, all coexisting peacefully. She saw Omega children playing without fear, saw her own twins racing their friends through the market square, saw the art school's lights glowing warm against the gathering dark. This was what they'd built, what her sacrifice had created, what her silence had accomplished. She'd been forced to serve poison to the Alpha King. She'd drunk it first to warn him, and in that moment of desperate courage, she'd found everything she'd ever needed. Love that saw her when she was invisible, purpose that gave her silence meaning, power that came not from words but from wisdom, observation, and fierce protective loyalty. A decade later, she was still the Poison Luna, the mute Omega who'd saved her king and transformed a territory. But more than that, she was simply Lira, mate to Kale, mother to Mira and Ash, Luna to thousands who looked to her for guidance and protection. She'd found her voice, not in speech that wouldn't come, but in every action, every decision, every life she touched. And that voice, silent but powerful, would echo, long after she was gone. "I love you," she sent through the bond, as the first stars appeared. "Thank you for seeing me." "I love you," Kale returned, pulling her close. "Thank you for saving me." Together, they watched the night fall over their territory, two souls bound by poison and choice, by silence and understanding, by a love that had transformed them both. The moon goddess had chosen well, and they'd proven her wisdom every day since. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.